to be agreed to. I call a member for Granville.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I join the Premier, Opposition Leader and Minister for Transport in extending an apology to those that lost their lives, those that lost loved ones, those that were injured and those that were traumatised by their role in rescue efforts during the Granville Train Disaster, Australia's worst rail accident. On the 18th of January 1977, an 8-car passenger train derailed and collided with the Bold Street Bridge, with the bridge collapsing on the third and fourth carriages, resulting in the deaths of 83 passengers and injuries to a further 213. It is a day no one will forget. Everyone I know who lived in Granville then and still lives there today has a story to tell about where they were that day and the people they know that joined in the rescue efforts. It is part of the collective memory of the people of Granville, as well as that of the survivors, the emergency service workers and volunteers, and the families of those affected, many of whom are here today and many of whom were traumatised for years by their experience that day. And to you, we offer our deep and sincere apologies. It is long overdue, and for that we also apologise. The crowded 8-car commuter train left Mount Victoria for the city at 6:09 a.m. As it was approaching Granville Railway Station, it left the rails and hit a row of supports of the overhead Bold Street Bridge. The derailed engine and first 2 carriages passed the bridge, but the first carriage broke free from the other carriages. Carriage 1 was torn open when it collided with a severed mast beside the track, killing 8 passengers. Less than 10 seconds later, with all its supports demolished, the 200-tonne concrete deck of the bridge collapsed onto the third and fourth carriages, crushing them and the passengers inside. Half the passengers in those carriages were killed immediately. Several injured passengers were trapped in the train for hours, with part of the bridge crushing their torso or limbs. Some had been conscious and talking to rescuers, but died of crush syndrome soon after the weight was removed. The community of Granville rallied to help those trapped in the wreckage, and for that all of us will be eternally grateful. Many volunteered to assist. Tradesmen bought their tools, everyone did what they could. One such volunteer was Father Les Campion, who rushed from Holy Trinity Parish Church. He was the first religious minister to arrive, and he provided pastoral care on the scene to the many injured victims, including those trapped in the wreckage. In the following years, Father Campion blessed the 83 roses laid at the scene on the 18th of January to remember the victims until he himself passed away. Every year the people of Granville join these commemorations. The Granville Memorial Wall contains the names of everyone killed in the disaster and ensures that they are not nameless people of the past. John Hennessy organised the commemoration for many years, and he was instrumental in raising funds for the original memorial. He passed away last year, but I'd like to acknowledge his contribution and also that of the Granville Train Disaster Association and Cumberland Council in upgrading the memorial this year. This year marks the 40th anniversary of the Granville Train Disaster, and it is a fitting occasion to provide this long overdue apology. While the Premier of the day, Neville Wran, wrote to the families of the deceased and personally apologised, it is fitting that the Parliament as a whole apologise for the loss of life and the lack of support given to those deeply traumatised by the accident and the situation that gave rise to it. The apology reflects the responsibility of the New South Wales Government for rail safety maintenance, which were woefully inadequate over many years leading up to the accident. Division engineers warned in a letter of the dangers of a derailment in November 1975, stating that maintenance policies were in need of urgent major reassessment. On the 8:10 train from Mount Victoria that day, according to Barry Gobby, there was a faulty leading wheel which had been identified months earlier but not replaced and left to run for another 50,000 kilometres until it left the loose track that day, causing the derailment. It certainly wasn't the case that the drivers or staff were in any way responsible, as early reports had indicated. They too are survivors and they too deserve our apologies. The community of survivors, rescuers and the families of those who lost their lives in the Granville Train Disaster share a special bond. Over time, many of them have come to know one another well, sharing the same grief and trauma. In recent years, they are coming together more frequently. Through their support for each other, they've been able to bring others into the fold, with a number of survivors and those who lost their loved ones attending the commemoration for the first time this year. It had been too painful for them beforehand. This year I was touched to meet Paul Tousell, one of the survivors, and his good friend Noel Boys, who was with the ambulance service and was his rescuer that day. Paul was fortunate that his usual seat on the train was taken. He was standing when the bridge fell on his carriage and was trapped and injured. His injuries would have been worse had he been sitting. The person who sat in Paul's seat was killed, or Paul's usual seat. Paul was the first person treated at the scene. He met Noel that day, and through this awful traumatic experience, they have become friends with a bond that has lasted 40 years. And this year, for the first time, the survivors group organised the commemoration themselves. And they did a wonderful job, led by Barry Gobby, the first ambulance officer on the scene, and Meredith Knight, who lost her father that day. It was a touching tribute, commencing with the names of the deceased being read out at 8:10 a.m, followed by a memorial service at St Mark's Church and a formal memorial service at the Memorial Wall. They have campaigned for this apology, and it is fitting that today the New South Wales Parliament comes together to do so.
Thank you. The question is that the motion as moved by the Premier be